One does not simply walk into Mordor. Moria, on the other hand, is pretty straightforward. You just speak friend and enter. Here to tell us about The Lord of the Rings Return to Moria, our friend, game director, Jon-Paul Dumont from Free Range Games. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you have a game that is about dwarves in Moria, mining. They're digging around, doing some stuff. People hear Lord of the Rings, they typically think the trilogy, but this is set in the Fourth Age. What does that mean in terms of lore? What are the stakes here? Because Sauron's dead. A lot of people have kind of, moved off to Florida, Grey Havens, what have you. So what's at stake, and what's kind of going on in Middle Earth as a
well, you hit on why we picked the story that we picked is what is the highest stakes. We knew we wanted to do dwarves and survival crafting because they're such perfect survival crafters. To them, there's no greater stakes than going back and taking their ancestral homeland.
Now let's talk about the sort of the crafting and the survival. How does sort of resources and crafting and all that work?
Well, the big thing is we jump right to forging, metalworking. These are the dwarves, after all. They don't just pick something up and use it. They make it themselves. So a lot of the game is mining. It's creating new alloys, discovering recipes for forged items that are ancient and older than they have right now in the Third or the Fourth Age.
Now I have to ask. We've seen some building in the trailer and gameplay here, but one of the things, the bridge of Kazad is like not in great shape. Will you be rebuilding it?
That's one of the parts of the game. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Kazad, absolutely. Yeah. So what happens is Gimli puts out this call. His time on Middle Earth is starting to get towards the end, and he feels like we've got to go back and take Moria back and make it Khazad-dûm. And so he puts out a call to all the dwarves across Middle Earth, and they all gather. And then things happen as you get inside, and you start to learn what's been going on in the 70 years since the ring was destroyed.
Nice. Now you touched on Gimli. John Rhys-Davies was in the trailer. Can you talk a little bit about working with him?
He was great. John Rhys-Davies is back as Gimli in Return to Moria. So we're really excited. He is Gimli. No one else could be Gimli but John Rhys-Davies. And you just hear the voice and you immediately know, yes, this is it.
I love it. Now let's talk about the mines as a whole and sort of how the world is laid out. Can you just sort of give us a crash course? Like how deep is it going to go? I guess how's it going to change? Is part of it locked off, or is it just full on go anywhere?
Well, first it's a procedural generated version of Moria. So the key landmarks, the Dimmerl Gate in the east, the Holland Gate in the west, the Endless Stairs, those are all there where you would expect if you really love the lore and know about it. But everything in between is generated differently. So I'll play one game and you could play a different game, and the path I would take to get to the different story points is different each time.
Awesome. And yeah, this is clearly meant to sort of, you get different crews together. It's got four-player co-op?
On the Epic Store, we're going to be up to 8 players.
Oh, wow.
On PlayStation 5, we'll be 4 players at launch.
That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how the game scales and how it reacts to more dwarves rooting around, singing and making noise and all that? Yeah,
well, it's going to be a different experience depending on if you're playing solo or if you're playing with up to 8 players. So if you're playing 8 players, resources are going to be a lot more scarce. When the orcs inevitably decide that they've heard you're here and come to take you down, there's going to be not only more of them, but they're going to be harder, and they're going to start bringing trolls with them. If you're playing alone, there will be more resources, but it becomes a little scarier. A lot of what you have to do in the game is manage your light and your noise. So it's a darker game when you're by yourself. It's a little scarier. It's a little bit more like a crafting horror game than it is the sort of jaunt that 8 players are. With 8 players, you get together, you brew some ale, you sing while you're drinking, and then when you're by yourself, it's really about like making sure you're prepared and that you've got everything you need before you move forward.
Now, there was a little prompt that popped up where the dwarfs had inspiration and you had the option to start singing.
Yes.
Tell me what that does. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, part of Lord of the Rings is the songs.
Oh, yeah.
Professor Tolkien spent a lot of time recreating the kinds of poems that would have happened in Old English or the Norse sagas that he based the books on. So in our game, as you're mining, as you're have a mug of ale out, and even when you're in a very important historical place, inspiration can strike, and then you can start singing. And each one of our dwarves, you can pick up to 10 voices to play, and each one of them has a different singing voice. So if you're playing with 2 people, they start to call and response and sing together. When you sing while you're mining, it makes the burden of mining easier, and you can mine harder and longer and get better stuff. You can sing to open up different areas. There are ancient runes of power that lock off areas, and if you know the right words to sing, then they'll open up.
Now, what about language?
Yeah.
Because they speak English sometimes. Is there Dwarvish too?
We did. We actually worked with a linguist named David Sallow who recreated the entire Dwarvish language for us. So we have a full lexicon, a full grammar, and in fact, you can pick, when you're picking your dwarf, you can choose to tell that dwarf to always speak in the Khuzdul language if you wanted to. And it's totally translatable. We're hoping to release that language to the fans.
Oh man, that is so much fun. Now let's talk combat and enemies. First big question is, like, a lot of people hear Moria, they think, the Balrog, but the Balrog is, not around these days. So what kind of stuff can we expect to see besides?
Well, the Balrog was a threat you needed someone like Gandalf to take out, and so to tell that story again would be telling Gandalf's story.
Right.
We've been really excited to try to tell a new story. So many experiences in Lord of the Rings are replaying the Ring story, and we want to tell something completely different. So we have a different big enemy that you will eventually figure out what's going on, and that's a big surprise. So I don't want to spoil that. But throughout, you are going to fight orcs and trolls, and you're going to find out what the unnamed things are that gnaw deep below the bones of the mountain.
Ooh. Now, because it's procedurally generated, is it sort of a different surprise around every corner?
It is, yeah. As you move through the story, it gets harder, and you need better stuff, and you progress from city and suburban kind of biomes into mines biomes, into what is down in the flooded areas, and then what are the darkest parts, and then on to eventually you get to the great city of Dwaradelf and these huge vistas. It's one of the fun things about the game is as you're going, you come across a collapse and you have to dig your way through from section to section. And each time you do that, you don't know what's on the other side. It could be a room that looks just like you were in. It could be a camp of orcs ready to ambush you. It could be a giant city vista with waterfalls and a grand view.
Oh man, this is all really exciting.
What you're seeing here is actually one of our deepest parts of the game that will take you a pretty long section. You're going to have to be really prepared. So you are actually descending from one of the higher levels down all the way to the deepest section you can go. So this is a little bit of truncated so we could show the whole thing, but this is a group of dwarves descending way, way far deep. One of our deepest descents.
I'm very excited to check this out. You can go mine some mithril for yourself when the Lord of the Rings Return to Moria hits PC and new-gen consoles later this year. But right now, more Gamescom Studio right here on IGN.